it has been a few years since Tempest Shadow moved to Ponyville after she had completed her journey to informing other kingdoms that Storm King once had conquered, that he was gone and no longer return. After that, she had moved to Ponyville. She, she accepted the offer for Twilight to stay at the castle for as long as she wanted. But once she had moved to Ponyville, at first she didn't had any idea what she was going to do. But Pinkie Pie offered her a position at the Sugar Cube Corner as her assistant, and since she likes to bake, turns out. And when Pinkie had asked Mr. and Mrs. Cake about this idea, they were actually very much open for it. After all, they were always willing to hire some new ponies to help them if they was getting any very much busy. And Tempest didn't hesitate to ask for accepting the offer. So for the past few years, she had been helping Pinkie Pie working as a baker. And she actually had introduced some of her own childhood sweets that she liked when she was a filly. And when she introduced those recipes to both Misters and Pinkie Pie, Mrs. Cake and Pinkie Pie, they were actually very much accepted. They were actually very interesting to see how the customers might like it. Especially Pinkie Pie. She was always eager to know more and new recipes. In fact, it happens sometimes that Pinkie and Tempest spend some time in the kitchen to experiment with some new flavors and new type of sweets that they can't be selling at the cafe. And Tempest actually didn't mind that, after all. She and Pinkie have got very close for the past 3 years since she has been working there. But despite that she has a lot of friends in Ponyville and has a great job, there was something deep in her heart that she missed the most. And that was on some special zone pony. But she hasn't even really much showing out much of her expressions that she wants to find some pony. Even her friends had seen that she somehow seems a bit lonely, because it happens sometimes that when she's finished her shift at the Sugar Cube Corner, she goes to the castle, goes to her room, and stays there. Or she sometimes takes walks or maybe go to Sweet Apple Acres to help Applejack. But other than that, she spent a lot of her own free time alone. And at first, Twilight was worried if something was wrong with her. So she didn't want to interrupt her or anything, but she asked Tempest just one day just to see if there was something wrong. But Tempest said that things were actually quite just normal for her. She was actually quite used to be alone after she left home and before she joined Storm King. So she got used to be alone for a number of years. So it was like the normal for her. But now she has a lot of friends who lives in Ponyville. She had been socializing with other ponies all the time, but for the most part she preferred to be alone. But one day when she was working with Pinkie Pie, she was actually working at the counter as a cashier just to make sure to see any new ponies that were coming in. So this day, she actually ran into some new pony that she hasn't seen before in town. But Pegasai, actually. She asked him what he was looking for to buy or was an interest in something, and he said that he wasn't really sure yet. This was actually his very first time at Sugar Cube Corner, and he didn't know exactly what to choose, so he did actually ask Tempest what she would recommend, at least for her experience, or some of her favorites. At first, she did introduce some of the favorites that she likes and some of the cafes, top popular cupcakes, muffins, cakes, pies, you name it. And he decided to buy at least a dozen of apple cupcakes. And she said yes and started packing them. So she asked him what his name is, and he said that his name is Jacky Breeze. He has actually just quite recently moved to Ponyville. She asked where he was from. He said that's actually from Manhattan. She was a bit surprised if a pony from a big city now lives in a small town in the countryside. She asked him for what's the reason why he moved from their place, and it turns out the main reason why he moved from Manhattan, it was that because he used to have a girlfriend back home. And they had been together for about 3 years, and they were quite happy with her. But things started to be different. He discovered during the 6 months during their 3 years of being together, he discovered she had been dating another stallion behind his back by being cheating on him. And Tempest looked at him stunned, hearing that story. She said, "I'm sorry to hear that." So he told her that he found out about them after a friend of his saw it happen, and he told her that he knew about it, and she didn't even deny it. It turns out she wasn't even in love with him anymore. So she had been start dating another stallion. But then he was like, "Why didn't you just break up with me if you didn't want to be with me anymore?" That it could at least had ended be more on peaceful terms. But she didn't seem so much. She didn't like the attention between two stallions, even though she only loved one of them. So he broke up with her, and even though that was only about a year later when he decided to move, he stayed in Manhattan for another year after that, and he wanted to move somewhere so that he can restart his new life. But there were so many places that he wished that he could go to. There were Trottingham, there were Canterlot, there were even Philadelphia, or even so many other places. But he wanted to go somewhere that was not like a big town, not too big, not too small. But after hearing some stories about Ponyville and reading about it to see much more, he wanted to read more about it. And it turns out he actually liked the reviews about ponies that had been told about stories of this small town, and even saw pictures of from the main city, from main part of downtown and the park, and he fell in love with the place immediately. Even he hasn't even been there. But he also found there was a small apartment in town that still out for rent. So he told his family and friends that he was leaving Manhattan to move. Even though they were sad to hear that, but all of them knew exactly from the main reason why, that he couldn't stand to be in a big city anymore. There were also another reason why he moved, because he started to get tired of living in a major city. Been living in a major city in his whole life. He wanted a different place. He wanted to be living in a more quiet place. So, after being hearing about Ponyville and reading about it, he decided to move there. And he hasn't even regretted a single day since then. And he asked about Tempest. Well, she didn't know exactly what to tell, because she wasn't sure if she should gonna tell about all her bad past. But she said that she also from a small town, and she left, traveled, and she later end up here. And he actually said, that sounds nice. Do you miss your home? And she said that she does sometimes, but since Ponyville and her old hometown are basically almost the same size and the number of ponies who live there, so she felt actually comfortable living here. After that, he thanked her for the cupcakes and paid for them and left. And even when Tempest went home to the castle later on in the evening, she was thinking about this Jacky Breeze. He seems kinda cool per pony to be around, and at first seems to be very interesting. But she did actually run into him a couple of times for the next couple of days at the market or the park, and they only small talk for a little bit. But after a while, though, Tempest started to realize maybe it was time to try to find some pony to be with. At least try to find some, maybe a potential boyfriend. So she did ask a couple of stallions that she knew in town. She actually went on a few days with them, but none of them didn't last that long, which turned to her was kind of sad. But when Rarity suggested this was called speed dating service in town, and Tempest thought about it and decided to give it a try. So when she went there to sign up, she saw a lot of stallions, mares, and she tried it for a list. But sadly, there were no matches known at all in this during her time there. Even there were a couple of stallions that was quite nice but gently, but she didn't feel any sort of connection to either of them. And to her, it was a bad setback. But she decided to give it a second try. So the next Friday, when she went there again, she tried a second time. But sadly, the same thing. There were only a few stallions that she did somehow could feel the connection, but they didn't have almost nothing in common. No type of music, food, anything. So she decided maybe the speed dating was not a good thing to do. But the same day after her second try, when she went to the park just to relax and figure out what to do next, when she heard a voice, and turns out when she saw Jacky Breeze. He was just walking by and saw her sitting there, seems to be in a deep thoughts. He didn't want to interrupt her, but he said hi to her, and she said hi back, and he then said that if he can sit down, and she said yes. So he did sit down, and at first was silence, and then this small talk and ended up being more serious conversation, then leads to more questions about themselves, and then Tempest realized that even despite that he doesn't know Jacky Breeze so much as well, but she did feel some sort of connection, and they did have a few things in common interest, like they liked the same type of music, and they had type of like to tell jokes, and they like both to bake. So, and she asked him if he had found a girlfriend in town, but he said no, because for the most part he has been focused on his work and socialized with new friends in town. But he had thought about maybe eventually to find some special someone to be with. She asked him what he if he would like to maybe go out on a picnic, date, movies, restaurant, or just. He said that he would like to go to the movies with her. But after all this thing, he said there's gonna be a new action movie in town, and turns out both actually did like action movies, so both agreed to go there the next day. On the next day, around 4 p.m., Tempest was waiting outside the the movies, and sure enough, Jacky Breeze showed up, and she was very happy. They both went there and actually had a great time. They had an amazing time there. And even afterwards, about maybe 2 hours later, they actually went to a small diner nearby to just grab something to quick to eat. And they were just talking about the movie, and it seems actually both have more things in common than they didn't realize it. But before they both went their different separate ways, he asked her if she maybe want to go out with him again. And for some reason, she felt she would like that and said yes. So for the next weekend, they actually had a picnic outside town, and both actually had a good time. And after a while though, even though despite have been dating for maybe a couple of weeks, Tempest felt maybe that Jacky Breeze could maybe be the right opponent for her. But she wasn't sure though. But she saw a potential in him. And but one day when they were decided to go to have dinner in the evening together as a date, Tempest arrived to this restaurant maybe 10 minutes earlier than the set time, but there was nothing problem that, said Jacky Breeze. But as she went there, when the time came when they were supposed to meet around 5 p.m., no signs of Jacky Breeze. So after a couple of minutes, but she was okay if he was late for 2 to 5 minutes. But time passed. But she saw the watch on the wall said 5:30 p.m. He hasn't been late for a half hour. And the waitress asked her if she was already ordered from a couple of times, but she decided to just grab something easy to eat and just left afterwards. She felt stood up. She couldn't believe it. She had no idea why suddenly that Jacky Breeze didn't show up. After all, he has always been there for her when they on the date, even if he was only a few minutes early or if he was only a few minutes late, but a half hour. And even when she was eating her food, he didn't even show it up. He didn't show up at all. So she was wondering if he longer was no interest in her. So after that, she went straight home to the castle, and for the next couple of days afterwards, she didn't speak to Jacky Breeze at all. But she later found out that the same day they were supposed to meet at the restaurant, he had left town just quickly without even notice her. She was like devastated. Has he left town because of her? And for some reason she felt such anger towards him. And when one of her friends mentioned about Jacky Breeze or if she had heard anything from him, she didn't want to speak much about him. But after a while, when Rainbow Dash asked her about it, have you heard anything about Jacky Breeze? And that was about maybe a week, only like 2 days after he left. And she said, don't mention that name to me anymore. I don't want to talk about him. I don't even want to see him anymore. Her friends was like stunned. After all, she and Jacky Breeze seems to be a loving couple together. This was something unusual. And only about a couple of days after he had left town, he came back. And when he saw Tempest out walking, he waved to her, and was about walking over to her, she just looked at him and just quickly turned around and ran off. He just then stopped and said to himself, did I say something? I don't think so. So he tried to walk over to the castle to ask Spike if Tempest was there. He said yes, but he said that she didn't want to see him anymore. and he asked why. But Spike said there was nothing to him to be talking about, so Jacky Breeze just stood there and left, and he was clueless. What happened? A few days earlier, they were just happy together, being a couple, but now she even refused to even speak to him or even look at him. What had even happened? So, when he found Twilight in the park by herself, he wanted like to ask her what happened, because he wanted to have some answers why suddenly Tempest didn't want to see him anymore. At first, Twilight was hesitated to even to tell, because it wasn't her place to just go telling some pony about some pony else's business. But she could see that he was actually clueless. He was actually serious, that sincere. He had no idea what was happening. So he sat down and she explained, because she was actually waiting for him at the restaurant, and he then realized his big mistake, and he forgot to inform the restaurant that he had to cancel this this rented reserved place for her and him. And she asked why. It turned out just the same day when he was supposed to be on the restaurant with Tempest, he found out that his mother was very ill, and she didn't seem to be we're not gonna make it, and also that she has been ill for some time. And even though she were seems to be making some progress in return to recovering, and suddenly it went turned down. It went downhill again. So his father told him in a letter stating that his mother may not survive any much longer, and he wished that he could just come back to town to Manhattan to see his mother before it was too late. And it was urgent. And he didn't have any time to go to a restaurant because it was so urgent. So he forgot to even arrange to reject the schedule on the restaurant and informing Tempest. And that surprised Rainbow, Twilight. So then she asked, is that the reason why he just hasn't even been back after a couple of days before after that? He explains that he wanted to spend enough time with his mother, even if that it was the very last time he was going to see her. But during his time with her when his family in Manhattan, his mother made a miraculous recovery. Even though at first his family were skeptical about this might use another downhill fast again, but it was the opposite. His mother made a slowly recover and eventually was allowed to go home. But he decided to stay on more a few days in town just to make sure his mother was okay. And when she was had been declared healthy enough, she was thankful for her son to be there, and then he decided to go back home. It was then when he found out that Tempest wasn't even going to see him. And Twilight said maybe it was time for her to hear the story herself. But Tempest wanted not want to see me or even listen to me. If you go with me, I will be there with you, Twilight said. So both went to to the castle, and luckily though, Tempest was in her room, and Jacky knocked on the door, and she asked who. It is me, Jacky. Can I talk to you? Go away, I don't want to talk to you. You broke my heart. Tempest, listen to him. He told me the reason why he wasn't even here, and why he stood up at the restaurant. And then he explained the same thing to her. At first, of course, Tempest didn't want to believe it. First, she thought maybe this was just a sad story, a made-up one to make her to believe it. But as she was listen to this more carefully, somehow she could sense that he was quite sincere in his tone of voice. So she opened the door and asked him, is that all real? You mean that that actually happened? And he nodded. And then she realized and understand why he had to leave so suddenly, and that he didn't have time to go to the restaurant in maybe an hour before, and informing them that he had to reschedule the booking for another time, and had to inform her at the same time. But since his father's letter was very much urgent, and all this processing, the all thoughts was going in his mind, and then he wasn't thinking clearly. So all he thought was like, go to train station as fast as it, and go to Manhattan as fast as he could. She was just devastated, blaming herself for that he stood up from her at all. But next time he said, next time if something happened, I will inform you before then. I promise. Can you give me a second chance? She said yes. So they actually went on another date a couple of days later. Even at first, Tempest felt so guilty to accuse him for something that he didn't even do, which he actually forgave her. And then, after they had been together for about 4 years, Jacky took Tempest to the meadows outside town to just have a good time, to relax under the trees, and when he did, propose to her, and she said yes immediately. She couldn't be more happier to be with someone like him. When they told their friends, they were overjoyed. Even when Jacky Breeze's family found out, both his parents were very much happy to hear what happened. And Tempest's parents, though, she hadn't even talked much to them ever since she came back, but Twilight had encouraged her to reach out to her parents to just tell them that she was okay, that she was living in Ponyville, and what she had been up to. So they were also invited to the wedding. They decided to have a small, close wedding with some close friends and some close family. And it was a perfect. Tempest had actually had asked Rarity to be her bridesmaid, and Jacky Breeze had asked Big Macintosh to be his best man, which they had also been quite good friends while living there. Both families and friends could see how happy Jacky Breeze and Tempest were together. They were clearly meant to be. And they actually went to a tropical island for a week for this honeymoon, which Twilight had arranged for them. And it was a great time when they were staying there. And just barely 2 years after they got married, both Jacky Breeze and Tempest informed their friends and families they were expecting their first baby within the next few months. And sure enough, within a few months later, they had a daughter, which they loved so much. And 3 years later, they actually had a son. The daughter turned out to be a unicorn, and the son, Tepesi, like his father. Tempest, though, she couldn't be more happier to be with some pony like Jacky Breeze. Even all those years ago, when she remembers when a time when she thought that Jacky Breeze just dumped her like that after she stood up her at the restaurant. But after learning the truth, in the end, she realized and felt so guilty. But she felt happy that Jacky Breeze didn't blame her for any of that. Just next time he should probably inform her if something would happen again. And for Jacky Breeze, though, he could have been happier to be with some pony like Tempest. Some pony like her is unique, kind, brave, strong, and very Hadley sometimes can have a short temper, but he loves her more than anything, and having a family with her is the absolute biggest dream that has come true. And this is how Tempest Shadow and Jacky Breeze found a true love and got a big family together. The end.